Sean, welcome to Uncommon Sense today. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
Today, the subject that you've chosen is: Has lean been stripped out of lean strategy deployment? And I think it's a great evocative title, but I'd like you to perhaps start with, what do you mean by lean strategy deployment?
So the within lean strategy deployment, the Japanese terminology for it before it got brought back over to us was Hoshin Kanri, and I'm not skilled enough at Japanese to interpret it, but essentially it's what's that true north and how do we make sure we're heading there. So what I mean by lean strategy deployment is what is the least wasteful way of making sure the entire organization understands where the organization is heading and that there is a clear connection between the decisions that are being taken about how to get there and who's going to be involved in making sure it happens, and making sure that it all ties back into the creation of value for the customer. So it's all of those things. And obviously we'll talk a little bit about what's happened to it since it came over, and where I see it going at the moment. But essentially the heart of it is making sure that the business's direction is true north, lines up with customer value, not just for now, but for the future, and make sure that the entire organization is aligned with that.
Okay, great, perfect. And help me understand, what made you choose this topic?
Well, it's something I've been reflecting on recently, Suze, and I was just listening to one of our own Uncommon Sense podcasts myself just a few weeks ago. And I was just reflecting on the title of our podcast, Uncommon Sense, and it made me reflect on, after many decades of being involved in this kind of work, how often the things that we now take for granted around Lean and Six Sigma, because we know they work, we know the evidence behind them, they are in themselves their own common sense. Yet client after client we work with, it's still often new. And some of the logic is new, and it's almost the opposite of common sense for most people. So our common sense and their common sense are not the same. And in fact, our common sense is still uncommon sense. So therefore, I was reflecting on, can I think of an example of this? And it made me go back all the way to my very first Greenbelt project, where I was constantly talking about things being counterintuitive with my clients. Well, it may be counterintuitive to do it like this, but let's just test it and see what happens. And of course, the results were, as you might expect, with a proper lean implementation. And this counterintuitiveness, I was slammed in the face with it very recently, where I saw a Hoshin Kanri deployment into an organization happening live in front of my eyes, not to do with the project I was involved with. And I looked at it and I thought, but that's not strategy deployment. That's just telling people what the 5-year plan is, but in a more complicated matrix. And I suddenly realized, and I looked closely at the template they were using, and I realized they'd stripped the lean out of it. And I thought, well, what have they put in its place? And what they put in its place was just traditional management logic. And
Right.
they distorted it. So that's why I thought what I want to talk about is one example of how the uncommon sense of lean is still uncommon, even if some of the language of lean is now commonplace.
I see. Great. Okay, so set the scene for us.
So setting the scene, let's just go back. I'll just choose a random period of time, the 90s. Let's imagine we're back in the 90s or the noughties, and there's lots of talk about business strategy going on. And Kaplan and Norton have done an amazing job in terms of the balanced scorecard, getting people to think more broadly. And Henry Mintzberg is writing about strategy and so on and so forth in whole new ways. So lots and lots going on around strategy. But what was the actual process behind it? And very often, if you'll forgive the paraphrasing of a more complex process, it's usually the top team gets together, sets some goals for the next 3 to 5 years, puts it out in a document, and then publishes it as the next 5-year plan, and people read it, and sometimes it's got some really useful information in it, but often what I would see happen, no disrespect to those involved with the work, but there was no mechanism for putting it out there into the world of work, and so it usually sat as an abstract document across the organization, and what it really did is it helped the culture to know what are the key phrases and what are the key things they needed to pay attention to. And that in itself was valuable, not knocking that at all. But the question was, how do you bring strategy alive? How do you get the whole organization to come online? And so looking into it as a lean practitioner, I looked into, well, what does lean have to say about it? And the one I came across that I originally trained with was Thomas Jackson's book, Hoshin Kanri for the Lean Enterprise, which was a Shingo Prize winning document. And of course, what it did is it took everything we understand about lean, about removing the waste, engaging the workforce, the mindset, and of course the process behind it, to really create a connection between the direction the company wants to go in, the value it's trying to achieve for both its customers and, of course, internal value, whether that's shareholder value or coming in on budget or whatever the relevant is for that company, but also tying together the vast array of different projects, initiatives, change programs, you name it, and process. It basically said if you want a different result, you have to change the way you do work. You either need to create new value streams or improve the value streams you've already got, or potentially close down value streams that are no longer suitable for the purpose. And you need to make sure they're properly resourced and led. So we need to, not just for our day jobs, or not just for our value streams where we have a rate of demand, we need to plan the capacity for it, and we need to then manage the performance of those value streams. The same logic was then being applied to how do we deal with strategy. So it's what are the new value streams or the new capabilities we wish to develop, and how are we going to plan the change capacity for it, and how are we going to make sure that that's properly resourced in amongst all the busy work, and then how are we going to make sure we've succeeded or not so that we can plan, do, study, act our way through to success. And it gave us that in a really, really straightforward, tight mechanism. And what was even better was, even for a relatively large organization, it only needed 3 levels to go from top team all the way to each team member in the organization knowing their contribution. And I loved the way that it tied it all together in a very straightforward hierarchy of deployment. So that's what I came across, and that's quite some years ago. I'm just having a look at the book now. I'm just seeing when it was published. Yeah, published 2006. So it's nearly 20 years old, this document. So all well and good, but what have I seen happen? And this is what scared the life out of me. I came across, and I'm not mentioning names here, but I came across a certain consulting firm that was selling as one of its specialisms strategy deployment. And I came across it through them having deployed their template into the client I was also working with. And their template was different to the one that I'd learned. Now, who's to say which one is right? And I would like to argue that the lean one is the right one. So let's compare the two, shall we? Let's have a look at what the two templates have. The lean template makes sure that you have at least 5 things properly considered. The strategy, what is it you're trying to accomplish in terms of the organization? The results you're looking to achieve. The tactics or the change programs you're going to run to achieve those results, and the processes and value streams that you're going to impact, and then who's going to be the allocated team leaders and team members for those changes. And if you look at that, what it creates then is a complete story of everything you need. Where are we going? How will we know whether we've got there? What are we going to do to accomplish it? Who are we going to involve? And where are we going to do the work? And it follows a full
Utter
plan, do,
common
study,
sense.
act cycle. Sorry?
Utter common sense. I mean,
It is
when you
absolute
when you
common sense.
describe it like that, you
Yeah.
think, of course, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah. And if we break that down, a strategy without a result is just a hot air. A strategy without a method for delivering it is going to achieve nothing. Something to be delivered without somewhere to deliver it is just noise in the system. It's just a program that sits out there in some darkened rooms. And team members and team accountability, without that, you have nothing. Because nobody's going to do the work. You've not planned for any capacity for your change. So again, it's just on the wish list. And one of the beauties of that method is it allows you to tie the way back. You set your strategy and the results, you set your strategy and the tactics, you establish the value streams. And if they don't all follow back round as a complete loop, then you've got your logic's gone wrong somewhere. And that was the essence of doing an effective strategy deployment exercise, where there was the top tier with the executive team, the middle tier, usually divisional or departmental, and then the frontline version of it with the individual teams and functions. And that logic always needed to follow round. If you didn't have enough leaders, then you're not going to run the change. If you didn't have a relationship between the change that you're looking to do and the area you're going to do it, then it's just an idea of the month club thing. If the area couldn't deliver the results you were looking for, then there's something wrong with the plan. If it doesn't have that full loop round. So guess what I discovered? I went and looked into, because I looked at this other template, and what I found with this other template is it didn't have those same categories, but it is using the exact same format, so you wouldn't know unless you look carefully. And what it does instead is it's changed. It's put the results has become targets or metrics to improve.
Okay.
But it's been changed in its position as well on the template. It's been moved and stripped out of process or the value stream. So process and value stream has been stripped out and replaced with a metric to improve, a target. Okay, fine. So now we've got nowhere to improve. So what's it put in its stead? It's split the strategy into long-term objectives and annual objectives. And that's a really important thing. It's taken out process and replaced it with a granular form of the strategy. Long-term, annual, then the change plan, then the target. And that is a perfect match for management by objectives. We set the long-term strategy, we break it down into shorter-term objectives, then we break it down into still shorter-term objectives, and then we set some targets to achieve. And then somewhere along the line, they've still got the team member bit, which is fine. No issue with that at all. But the problem is it's just setting arbitrary targets. And we know what Deming calls that, tampering.
Yes.
And so when I say, have we stripped lean out of lean strategy deployment? I say, yes, we have, because we've stripped out process and replaced it with tampering, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So the common sense is managers lead by management by objectives, because that's the prevailing management philosophy. Along comes lean that says, hang on a second, there's a way that you can pull everybody together, make sure that everything's properly resourced, balanced, ties up, there's a logic. That's too complicated, that's too difficult, that's too challenging for the management team. So what have they done? They've taken the template and made it fit with the prevailing management philosophy, management by objectives. And then the cognitive dissonance has gone away. Oh, we can relax, we can fill in our template, job is done. And that's unfortunately what I've seen happen.
That's missing those important areas that help guide the people who are trying to do the work into the right direction and ensure they're
which value
focused on the right
streams are we going
processes.
to change? Yeah. And so the
Yeah.
whole thing, and what I see happening is people can't then cascade it because it doesn't know where to cascade it, because we haven't defined where the work is going to happen, where the change is going to happen. So there's no mechanism for creating the cascade, which then removes the deployment bit from it. So we started with lean strategy deployment. We've removed lean. We've now removed deployment, other than just arbitrary passing on of targets, which they had anyway without the tool. And all we've left with is strategy, but no different to what they had before. So they've taken the old process and stuck it into the new template. And I looked online today. I just searched under Google Images Hoshin Kanri matrix. And good news, I could find the lean matrix. But guess where in the queue it came? How many did I have to look through before I found the actual lean one? 60. It was the 61st picture
You're
on Google
joking.
Images as of today. All the
Goodness.
previous
Okay.
60 are all management by objectives. Now, you can forgive a manager if they've heard of Hoshin Kanri or strategy deployment,
Yes,
they go onto Google to look it up. You can forgive them for thinking that the top 60 are going to be the right one, can't you?
of course. Of course.
Because they're
So
all the
really,
same.
this is a health warning to anyone who's looking for Hoshin Kanri as a mechanism for deployment. You need to be looking for those 5 factors that include process and include results rather than goals in order to help your team get to the right place through strategy deployment. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sean. That's super advice.
Well, hopefully we'll see some lean strategy deployment happening as a result of this.
I hope so too.